In the heart of a dense, sprawling forest, obscured by twisted vines and towering trees, stood a building that whispered secrets into the wind. Dr. Alexander Hartman's laboratory. It was more fortress than a place of science, with walls as thick as a bank vault's and windows barred like those of a prison. No casual wanderer would stumble upon it, nor would the sane seek it out if they knew what transpired within. Dr. Hartman, a man in his late 40s with a mane of silver hair and eyes like storm clouds, was once celebrated in the scientific community for his groundbreaking contributions to biogenetics. However, his incessant pursuit to unravel life's final mystery had led him down paths less trodden, into realms that others in his field dared not venture. His colleagues had labeled him a maverick, a renegade teetering on the edge of moral science. And eventually, he isolated himself from the academic world that once adored him. The doctor's obsession began with the death of his wife, Elise. She had succumbed to a rare, untreatable disease that slowly decayed her mind and body. Her final days were spent in agony, her once vibrant voice reduced to pained whispers. Dr. Hartman, unable to save her, could only watch as death claimed the love of his life. It was at her deathbed, under the solemn promise whispered to her still form, that he vowed to conquer death itself. The laboratory was his sanctuary and his curse. It was here that he pioneered the controversial ECHO project, a series of experiments designed to capture the essence of life, to hold it, understand it, and ultimately, control it. Dr. Hartman believed that within every living cell, there lay an echo of existence that could be harnessed and perhaps immortalized. On a stormy night, as lightning danced like spectral figures across the sky, Dr. Hartman was on the brink of a breakthrough. His current experiment was his most audacious yet, reanimating the cellular structure of a recently deceased organism. His subject, a small sparrow that had crashed lifelessly against his laboratory window, lay connected to a myriad of devices on a metal slab. The lab was filled with the hum of machinery and the sharp scent of ozone mixed with formaldehyde. Screens flickered with data as electrodes sent pulses into the lifeless form of the bird. Dr. Hartman adjusted the dials of his machine, his fingers trembling with anticipation and fatigue. Not from physical exertion but from the heavy burden of his relentless pursuit. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught his eye. The sparrow's chest heaved, an erratic, unnatural movement, as if it were gasping for air after being submerged underwater. Dr. Hartman's heart raced. He leaned closer, his face mere inches from the bird. The sparrow's eyes snapped open, glowing an eerie, unnatural blue. It turned its head, fixing its gaze upon him with an intelligence that no sparrow should possess. "Elise," he whispered, his voice a mixture of hope and horror. The sparrow cocked its head, considering the name, its beak opening as if to speak. But instead, it let out a chilling shriek that echoed through the cavernous room, reverberating against the cold metal walls. Dr. Hartman stumbled backward, his chair clattering to the ground. The sparrow flapped its wings violently, breaking free from the electrodes and soaring around the lab in a frenzied blur. The doctor watched, his vision blurring with tears, not knowing if they were born of joy at his success or terror at the abomination he had created. As the storm outside reached its crescendo, the power fluctuated, plunging the laboratory into darkness. In the brief moments before the emergency lights flickered on, Dr. Hartman felt a presence pass by him, a whisper of air and a faint, melodic echo that sounded suspiciously like Elise's laughter. When the lights returned, the sparrow was gone, and the window stood open, the wind howling in like a chorus of the damned. Dr. Hartman approached the window, peering into the tumultuous night, his heart pounding with a dreadful realization. What had he unleashed upon the world? Was it a breakthrough in science? Or had he opened a door to something ancient and unfathomable? Dr. Hartman knew he could not stop now. His obsession demanded it. He needed to find the sparrow, to understand the full extent of his creation. But deep down, a gnawing fear took root, that in his quest to defeat death, he had instead invited something far more sinister into the world of the living. Thus, under the oppressive shadows of the towering trees and the relentless assault of the pouring rain, Dr. Alexander Hartman's journey into the unknown took a perilous turn, setting the stage for horrors yet to come. The lab was silent except for the steady drip of a leaking pipe somewhere in the darkness. A metronome marking the passage of time in Dr. Alexander Hartman's secluded world. It was late, or perhaps early, for the sun had long since abandoned the sky, leaving only the cold, indifferent light of the moon to spill through the thick glass of the laboratory windows. Dr. Hartman stood over his workbench, his silhouette illuminated by the soft glow of a single overhead lamp. Papers littered the surface, strewn amongst glass beakers and vials filled with iridescent liquids that shimmered like captured starlight. His eyes were bloodshot, evidence of countless sleepless nights spent in pursuit of a singular goal. The air was thick with the scent of chemicals, a pungent reminder of his obsession. For years, the doctor had been chasing the ghost of his late wife, Elise, in the shadows of his experiments. Each failure had driven him deeper into madness, a descent marked by the growing collection of failed serums and compounds that lined the shelves of his lab like tombstones. But tonight was different. Tonight, the pieces of his tortured puzzle had finally begun to align. The breakthrough came unexpectedly, a serendipitous result of a forgotten experiment left to its own devices in the corner of the lab. A petri dish, smeared with a concoction of chemicals and plant extracts, had been exposed to the moonlight streaming through a crack in the window shutters. What drive Hartman discovered in that dish was nothing short of miraculous, a vibrant culture of cells. Not just surviving but thriving, regenerating at a rate he had never before observed. With a frantic energy, he replicated the conditions of that accidental discovery, adjusting variables with the precision of a mad composer crafting his magnum opus. The final composition was a serum, translucent and gleaming under the lab lights, a liquid symphony of potential eternal life. His hands trembled as he filled a small vial with the serum, sealing it with a stopper. Dr. Hartman held it up to the light, watching the serum swirl within, its luminescence casting ghostly shadows on his worn face. The implications of his discovery were vast, the potential monumental. Yet, as he gazed into the depths of the vial, a sense of foreboding crept over him. Was he ready to shoulder the consequences of defying nature's most fundamental law? The answer came in a whisper, so faint he might have imagined it, Elise. It was enough to steel his resolve. Dr. Hartman needed a test subject. Someone who could prove that his serum was the panacea he believed it to be. He thought of the sparrow, that first, terrifying success of reanimation. It had been an abomination, a creature caught between life and death, its existence an echo of the natural order. This time, he needed something more controlled, more definitive. His opportunity came with the arrival of a storm-damaged squirrel, its body battered by the night's ferocity, life ebbing away on his doorstep. It was an omen, he decided, a gift from the dark recesses of the universe, delivered to his very feet. With the squirrel laid out on the metal slab, Dr. Hartman administered the serum, injecting the luminescent liquid directly into its failing heart. Then he waited, his breath caught in his throat, his eyes not daring to blink. Minutes passed, each second stretching into eternity. Just as despair began to set in, the squirrel's chest quivered. A gasp of breath, ragged and raw, filled the silent lab. Its eyes fluttered open, gleaming with unnatural vitality. It sat up, its movements fluid, its injuries mending before drive. Hartman's astonished eyes, a laugh, wild and unhinged, burst from the doctor. It was a sound born of relief and terror, for the squirrel before him was no longer merely an animal, it was a vessel of life, unbound by the shackles of mortality. But as he watched the creature scurry around the lab, its movements too precise, too deliberate, a cold realization dawned on Dr. Hartman. The serum had not just restored life, it had enhanced it, twisted it into something other. Something beyond human understanding. What had he created? A cure for death, or a new form of existence, one that could not be controlled or contained? Dr. Hartman knew he should destroy his creation, stop the experiment before it went further. But his heart, heavy with the loss of Elise and the promise of a reunion, overruled his head. So, he watched, transfixed, as the squirrel disappeared into the shadows of the lab. Its eyes a pair of gleaming beacons in the darkness. Dr. Hartman had crossed a threshold beyond which there was no return. The path ahead was shrouded in mystery and menace, but he could not, would not, turn back. Not when every beat of his heart whispered her name, pulling him deeper into the abyss of his own making. Dr. Eric Hartman had initially celebrated his newfound vitality, the serum pulsing like liquid fire through his veins, bestowing upon him what seemed like the endless bounty of life. He walked through his days with the cocksure stride of a man who had beaten nature at its own game. The physical changes were miraculous. His skin tightened, wrinkles fading like old photographs in sunlight, his vision sharpened. And his hearing grew so acute he could discern the whisper of leaves in the wind from his bedroom window. But the gloss of immortality began to dull with the passage of weeks. Sleep, which had once been his respite, now evaded him like a scorned lover. His nights were restless, spent pacing the dark, endless halls of his mansion, or poring over his old research notes, desperate to find some oversight.